The second day it rained, and Dad spent the morning doing bookwork in the house. The third day, Dad was back in the fields, but when Luke crept over the back door promptly at 9 a.m. and daringly flipped the light switch on, he got no answer flashing from Jen's house. Maybe the clocks in her house were so. He left the light on for 15 whole minutes, terrified the whole time that somebody besides Jen might see it. Finally, heartsick, he switched it off and climbed with shaky legs back to his room. What if something had happened to Jen? What if she were sick? Dying even alone in her house? What if she'd been caught or turned in? Just from the little time Luke had spent with her, he could tell she took lots of risks. It never had occurred to him that knowing another person would give him someone else to worry about. He steadied himself by leaning against the wall at the top of the stairs and reminded himself of less frightening possibilities. Maybe one of her parents was just out running errands, not working, so they were going to be home soon. Maybe he tried to think of another safe reason Jen hadn't signaled for him to come. But he had so much trouble picturing her ordinary life that his imagination failed him. He found out the next day when he risked a dash to Jen's house as soon as she answered his signal. "Where were you?" he asked instantly. "When? Yesterday?" she yawned, sliding the door behind him. "Did you try to come over? Oh, I'm sorry. Mom had a free day and made me go shopping." Luke gaped at her. "Shopping? You went out?" Jen nodded nonchalantly. "But I didn't see you leave," Luke protested. Jen looked at him as if she seriously wondered if he had a brain. "Of course not. I was hiding. Backseat of our car is hollowed out. Dad had it custom built." "You went out?" Luke repeated in awe. "Well, it's not like I saw anything until we got to the mall. 2 hours of riding in the dark is not my idea of fun. I hate it." "But at the mall, you get out? You didn't have to hide?" Jen laughed at his amazement. "Mom got a forced shopping pass long time ago, supposedly on her niece. Good enough to convince store clerks, but if the population ever found out about me in a roadside stop, I'd be dead. There you have it. My mom's priorities. Shopping's more important than my life." Luke shook his head and sat down on the couch because his knees were feeling a bit shaky. "I didn't know," he said. "I didn't know thirds could do that. Even what if Mother and Dad got him a forged pass?" For a minute, he could almost picture it. They could hide him under the burlap bags in the pickup truck bed until they got into town. Everybody in town knew Mother and Dad. Everybody knew Mother and Dad had only two sons, Matthew and Mark. "You went to the city?" he said. "Well, yeah," Jen said. "You don't see any malls around here, do you?" "What was it like here?" Luke almost whispered. "Boring," Jen said. "Really, really boring. Mom wanted to buy me a dress, who knows why, so we went to one store after another. I had to try on all these dresses that scratched and pricked and poked me. Then she made me get a bunch of bras." "Oh, sorry," she said when Luke flushed a deep red. "I guess you don't talk much about bras in your house." "Matthew and Mark do sometimes when they're being dirty," Luke said. "Well, bras aren't dirty," Jen said. "They're just torture devices invented by men or mothers or something." "Oh," Luke said, looking down. "Anyway," Jen said, with a bounce propelled her off the couch, "I checked you out on the computer and you're all right. You don't exist. Not officially anyway, so you're safe." And hearing Jen say it so flippantly, "You don't exist," made Luke feel funny. "How do you know I'm safe?" he interrupted. "Fingerprints," Jen said. When Luke gave her a blank look, she explained, "My brother Braun went through this phase where he wanted to be a detective. Not that he ever would be smart enough for it. And I remember he still had a fingerprinting kit. So I dusted for your fingerprints on things you touched, just like on TV. I got a really good print off the wall. Then I scanned that into a computer, like into the national file of fingerprints, and voila, I discovered your fingerprints don't exist. So neither do you, officially." She made a mocking face for emphasis. Luke wanted to ask, "The population police can't find me because of what you did, can they?" But he understood so little of what she explained that he didn't think it would help to ask anything. And Jen was already on to the next thought. "Anyhow, you seem trustworthy. So now that I know you're safe, I can tell you about the rally and show you our secret chat rooms and everything." Jen was already leaving the room, so he had to follow just to hear the rest of her sentence. "You want something to eat or drink?" she asked, hesitating at the doorway to the grand kitchen. "I was surprised, so surprised I forgot to be a good hostess last time. What'll it be? Soda? Potato chips?" "Those are illegal," Luke protested. He remembered reading something about junk food in one of the books in the attic and asking his mother about it. She explained that it was something for people used to eat all the time, till the government shut down the factories that made it. She wouldn't tell him why, but as a special treat she brought out a bag of potato chips she'd been saving for years and shared them just with him. They were salty but hard to chew. Luke had pretended to like it only because his mother seemed to want him to, so obviously the chips were stale. "Yeah, well, we're illegal too, so why shouldn't we enjoy ourselves?" Jen asked, thrusting a bowl of chips at him. To be polite, Luke took a chip, then another and another. These potato chips were good. He had to hold himself back from grabbing them by the handful. Jen stared at him. "Do you go hungry sometimes?" she asked in a low voice. "No," Luke said in surprise. "Some shadow children do because they don't have food ration cards and the rest of their family doesn't share. she said, opening a refrigerator that was bigger than every appliance in Garner's kitchen put together. My family can get food all we want, of course, but she looked at him in a way that once made him conscious of his ragged clothes. How does your family get food for you? The question puzzled Luke. Same way they get it for themselves. We grow it. We've got a garden. I used to work in a lot before, and then we have the hogs, or used to, and I guess sometimes we get trade a butchered hog for somebody else's butchered steer so we'd have beef. Those were all Shadowy Chen's actions in Luke's mind. He had to strain his brain to remember overhearing Dad or Matthew reporting to Mother, "You ready to get some steak? Johnson up nearly Liverpool will want some ham." Jen dropped a plastic bottle full of brown liquid. "Do you eat meat?" she exclaimed. "Sure, don't you?" Luke asked. "When Dad can get it," Jen said, pending the pickup of the bottle. She poured a glass for Luke and one for herself. Both drinks fizzed and bubbled. "Even his cloud isn't that great. The government's been trying to force everyone, even the barons, to become vegetarians." "Why?" Luke asked. Jen handed him his glass. "Something about vegetables being more efficient," she said. "Farmers have to use a lot more land to produce 1 pound of meat than to produce a pound of, what's it called, soybeans?" Luke wrinkled his nose at the thought of eating soybeans. "I don't know," he said slowly. "We've always fed our hogs the grain we couldn't sell because it didn't meet government standards, but since the government made us get rid of our hogs, Dad just lets that grain rot in the field." "Really?" Jen grinned as if she just announced the overthrow of the government. She thumped him back just as he took his first sip of soda. Between the bubbly drink and her enthusiastic pounding, Luke started coughing. Jen didn't seem to notice. "See, I told you you'd be a big help. I'm going to post that on the bulletin board right now." "Wait!" Luke sputtered between coughs. He didn't know what she was talking about, but he couldn't let her get into his family in trouble. He chased her down the hall, catching up as she was sliding in front of the chair in front of the computer. She switched it on and made the beep 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 sound Luke had heard for the last time. Luke stood to the side, carefully out of the screen. So again, when this book was written, this beep 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 sound is basically the modem connecting to the internet. Nowadays, modems don't make any noise, but back in the day they did. "It's not going to bite you," Jen said. "Grab a chair. Sit down." Luke inched back. "But the government," he said. "The government's incompetent and stupid," Jen said. "You get it? Believe me, they were watching through my computer screen. I'd know by now." Meekly, Luke pulled over a padded chair and he sat down. He watched as Jen typed in, if the government let farmers feed the animals the grain they can't sell, there'd be more meat." Luke was relieved that she hadn't mentioned his family, but unless the government was spying on them, he couldn't understand what difference it made for her to write that. "Where'd that go?" he asked as the words disappeared. "Who's seeing that?" "I put it on the Department of Agriculture bulletin board. Anybody with a computer can find it now. Maybe a government worker with half a brain will see it and actually think for the first time this decade." "But," Luke squinted in confusion, "what does it matter?" Jen fixed her gaze on Luke. "You don't even know, do you?" she asked. "You don't know why they passed this population law." "No," Luke admitted. "It's all about food," Jen said. "The government was scared we'd all run out of food if the population kept growing. That's why they made me, illegal, to keep people from starving." Luke suddenly felt doubly guilty for the potato chips he was still cramming in his mouth. He swallowed hard and lowered his hands to his lap instead of back into the chip bowl. "So if I didn't eat, my food would go to someone who was legal?" Luke said. "But in his family, that would just be Matthew or Mark, and they were hardly starving. Matthew was even starting to sport the same roll of fat around his waist that Dad had." Then Luke remembered the tramp from long ago saying, "I ain't eaten in 3 days." Was that Luke's fault? Jen laughed. "Stop looking so worried," she said. "That's what the government thinks, but they're wrong. My dad says there's plenty of food, it's just not distributed right. That's why they've got to stop the population law. That's why they've got to recognize you and me and all the other Shadow kids. That's why we're going to have the rally." As ignorant as he was, Luke could tell from the way she said it that this rally was important. "Can you tell me about that rally now?" he asked humbly. "Yeah," Jen said. She pushed away from the computer and twirled on her chair. "Hundreds of us, all the Shadow children I could track down, are going to march on the government in protest. We'll get right to the president's house. We won't leave them alone until they give them the same rights everybody else has." Just my luck, Luke thought. I finally meet another third child and she's absolutely crazy. "And," Jen said as bubbly as shaking soda, "you can come too. Won't it be great?" Chapter 18. Luke said. He couldn't look at Jen's triumphant grin. I don't think he thought about how terrifying it was just running back and forth between his house and Jen's. Even this morning, in his third run through their yards, his heart had pounded so hard he'd wondered if he could burst from fear. And in their yard, at least, he was sure, or sure as he could be, that nobody was watching. How could Jen think he would dare go out in public, where he knew people could see him, people in government no less, and say, "I'm a third child. I want to be treated like everybody else"? "Are you scared?" Jen said softly. Luke could only nod. Jen turned back to the computer. "Well, I am too," she said matter-of-factly. She typed something then looked back at Luke. "Some, but don't you think it would be a relief? No more hiding, no more pretending, just being free?" Luke wondered if he'd always misunderstood the meaning of the word relief. Jen's rally sounded like his worst nightmare. "You can think about it," she said. "You don't have to decide anything today now. Ready to chat?" Luke looked back at the computer screen where rows of words were unfailing. Carlos, it's 1:05 here, and my parents think it's a waste of time running the AC during the day. Can you say heartless? Sean, why don't you just crank it up then and turn it off again right before they go home? That's what Pat and I do. They'll never know. Yeah, but my parents read the electric bill. So Yolanda, so what are they going to do? Ground you? Carlos, good point. I'm searching for that temperature control right now. Yolanda, where's Jen? Well, Sean, you know she'd never get up this early. Carlos, curses, my parents have the temperature control locked somehow. I told you they were evil. Where's Jen? I can't wait for her sarcastic comment. Luke read the words that Jen was typing. I'm right here. And Sean, I do get up so early, so I just don't always choose to see you the first thing. And Carlos, what's wrong? Is there sweat in your eyes? There's only one R in sarcastic. She hit another key, and the words appeared right in front of everybody else's. They were followed by a quick line. Sean, oh, good morning to you, Jen. Glad to see you're still among the living. Jen typed quickly, no, just among the hidden. That's not the same thing at all. Then she sent it too. What is this, Luke asked? Some sort of game? He remembered Jen mentioning Carlos before and never explaining who he was. Were these some sort of imaginary computerized friends? Carlos, Sean, Yolanda, they're all third children. Sean's even got a brother, Pat, who's a fourth child. This is how I talk to him. Luke watched the next line of type appear. Carlos, thanks for the sympathy, Jen. But how? Luke asked, still doubtful. Oh, it's the net, Jen said. If you get a spare hour or two sometime, I'll give you the technical gobbledygook to explain it. All I care about is how it works. I'd die without someone to talk to. She was typing even as she talked. Luke craned his head to see what she wrote. Guess what? The kid I told you about, Luke, he's here with me. Quickly, 3 high Lukes appeared on the screen. Luke fought down his panic. But the government, he said, they'll find me. Jen playfully slugged his arm. Hey, chill out, okay? Nobody from the government can get in this chat room. We all use a password. Just third children know it. Anyhow, even if somebody else read this, what would they know? Just that we're somewhere in the world and there's a kid named Luke. Big deal. But they can trace this computer. They'll find me too. Luke's heart was still pounding. Look, if they could trace people through the computer or through this chat room, wouldn't they have found me a long time ago, Jen asked. Luke tried to think clearly. Your parents, he said. You said they bribe people so you're safe, but mine? Jen was shaking his head. No, I'm safe, she said. Even if my parents couldn't bribe the population police and they found me, maybe they keep them from looking, but maybe not even that. Population police get some ridiculously big reward for every illegal they find. Why do you think I hide it all? Why do you think we have to have this rally? Everybody ought to be safe. And nobody should have to use bribes just to walk down the street or go to a mall or take a ride in a car. Luke glanced back at the computer screen where the conversation continued. How did all these people find out the password? How did you? Well, I created this chat room, so I made it up. And I knew a couple of other shadow kids, and I got my parents and their parents to give them the password. And then some of those kids spread that password to other kids they knew. Last time I counted, I had contact with 800 kids. Luke shook his head. He didn't even think his parents knew that many people. So what's the password? He asked. Free, Jen said. It's free.